Hey folks, this is Kalani. We have some big updates this week. The Onyx Annulet ring that a lot of players are still using from patch 10.0.7 is going to see some very big nerfs. To offset that loss, specific classes and specs will see more buffs when compared to others, so it's a big round of buffs in this week's update, coupled with a handful of nerfs just sprinkled in there to keep us on our toes. We also have our first look at Warlock pet customization. There's a new way to get almost any mount in the game, and there are some nice quality of life updates to go over as well. There's a lot to talk about, so let's break it all down and see what's been going on in WoW this week. Now before we jump in, be sure to hit up that like button and subscribe so you never miss another video. Let's kick things off with the class changes, buffs and nerfs, because this week was quite special. The first big nerf isn't for any class or spec specifically, but for an item that a lot of people still use, the Onyx Annulet. This ring was introduced in 10.0.7 and is still incredibly strong for quite a lot of specializations, probably too strong for an item level 424 ring from the previous season and patch. So it's getting nerfed, quite heavily in fact. Every primordial stone that deals damage will now deal 40% less damage, so a 40% nerf for any and all damaging effects related to the Onyx Annulet and primordial stone system. That's going to impact different specs and classes in a wide variety of ways, but the dev team have added a note here that anyone who was heavily reliant on the amulet for their damage profile or performance will be getting some buffs to offset the loss. So if you think most of your damage still comes from your ring, keep an eye out as we work through the class changes. We'll go through in alphabetical order, that's never failed us before. So for the Death Knights, ghouls will have 85% of the Death Knight's health, up from 50%. Death Coil healing has been increased by a hefty 75%, and there's a quick buff to blood damage, an 8% increase across the board, which is pretty decent. Demon Hunters just get a simple damage increase for Vengeance, so they're going to see a 4% damage boost across the board. For the Druids, Rebirth will now cost 2% of base mana, up from 0%, but the bare cost will remain unchanged. Mana regen for Balanced Druid and Feral Druid were both knocked down to 100%. We're actually going to see this a lot in this week's notes. I guess they're reducing the hybrid mana regen back down as part of that ongoing hybrid healing change. Feral also gets a 5% buff to Ferocious Bite. Dire Fixation was bumped up to 8% increased damage from 5%. Primal Claws has been removed, Dire Fixation is being moved to that location as a rank 1 talent, and Rampant Ferocity is being redesigned, so lots of changes for Feral this week. Guardian Druid will also get a 6% damage increase to keep up with the other tanks, and Resto Druid is coming in swinging with a 25% boost to all of their damage, probably to help offset the loss of the Onyx Annulet in certain types of content. There's also a bug fix thrown in for good measure. Up next are the Evokers, who have some very interesting changes with this build. There's a new talent, Potent Mana, which gives Source of Magic an additional effect. Increases the target's healing and damage by 3%. Source of Magic can only be given to healers, so this will help out your healers even more if you decide to run with Source of Magic. Regenerative Magic has been redesigned to provide 3% leech and has been moved in the talent tree. Draconic Legacy is now just a 1 rank instead of 2 rank talent, with the same full value as the previous 2 ranks, so you'll get an extra point to spend there, and it has also been moved in the talent tree. Blast Furnace saw the exact same thing. It's now just a 1 rank talent instead of 2, but with the full previous 2 rank effect. Augmentation has a few changes too. Spatial Paradox now increases the range of heals by 100% instead of a flat 40 yards, and they also get the same mana regen reduction down to 100%. Preservation will see a 10% increase to all of their spell and ability damage, but it doesn't apply in PvP, and Life Giver's Flame was knocked down to 35 and 70%, down from 40 and 80%. The Frost Mage update has quite a few changes to go over too. There are a lot of bug fixes. Mastery will now also increase Ebon Bolt damage, and Mastery scaling will change for AoE spells. Frozen Orb damage was reduced by 15%, Glacial Spike cast time was increased and the damage was reduced. There are other nerfs to various talents, some damage increases, a few talents have been shifted around, and we have even more new talents added into the mix. There's even an option to turn Ray of Frost into an AoE or cleave ability, which could be really cool. The monks are up next. Brewmasters are getting a new talent that looks like it would replace Tiger Palm, providing you with extra damage and various other bonuses. All of their damage was also increased by 7%. Rising Sun Kick and Blackout Kick were increased by a further 20%, and Tiger Palm and Invoked Nizal were increased by a further 50%. So some crazy buffs coming in for Brewmaster. For Mistweaver, all spell and ability damage was bumped up by 10%. Ancient Teachings was nerfed slightly, and Font of Life now increases Essence Font Healing by 25% instead of a static amount. And then right at the end there, Windwalkers will also get a 2% damage boost, just to make sure they didn't feel left out. Moving on, Paladins will see further updates for all of their specs. For Holy, various passive and effects have been reduced or nerfed. There are some new animations, a couple of bug fixes, a 10% increase to all damage, and another nerf for Avenging Crusader. For protection, Word of Glory now costs 10% base mana, mana regen was knocked down to 100%, and all ability damage was increased by 4%. For Retribution, we see the same mana changes. Hammer of Wrath now generates holy power when cast on immune targets, which is quite a specific change, but I guess it's better than it not generating holy power. There are some tooltip fixes, as well as another 2% damage boost across the board. Priests have a few quick updates this week. Discipline will see a 10% boost to all of their damage, but Atonement will actually see a slight nerf. 36% of all damage will transfer, down from 40%, so you deal more damage, but less of it will convert to healing. And then Holy will also see the same 10% boost to all of their damage across the board. Rogue has a couple of notes here too. The dev team want to give Outlaw a buff to offset the Onyx Annulet nerfs, but they're also working on a change to Ghostly Strike, so they want to do both at the same time, so we will probably see an Outlaw buff in next week's PTR updates. Subtlety doesn't have to wait though, they're going to get a quick 4% damage boost across the board. Shamans have quite a few changes this week too. For Elemental, their mana regen is being reduced down to 100%, just like the other hybrids. Enhancement has the same change there down at the bottom, but they're also getting some big damage buffs. Storm Strike and Wind Strike damage was increased by 20%. Lava Lash and Ice Strike damage also increased by 20%. The old 4 set from Vault of the Incarnates is getting nerfed, and the Aberris 4 set is also getting nerfed, but the dev notes here say that this should equate to a buff in single target, while keeping your AoE damage about the same. Hopefully they're right on that one. And then to join in with the other healers, Resto Shamans will also get a 10% damage increase across the board. Then we come to the Warlocks. Nightmare has been redesigned to now increase the amount of damage required to break your fear effects by 60%, and demon customizations are available at the barbershop after learning grimoires. We'll touch on this more in just a moment. And then the Warriors squeak in at the end with a simple 6% damage boost to all of Protection's abilities and damage, and that rounds out our class changes for this week's PTR build. Now remember, all of these changes are for patch 10.1.5, so we will have to wait for them to go into effect. I would use the time between now and next patch to at least get some ring options ready for when those big Annulet nerfs come through, and I think the patch will probably release sooner than most people think, so keep your eyes peeled for an announcement date coming soon. Moving on, a very interesting item was found on the patch 10.1.5 PTR which has some insane potential. The Reins of the Quantum Courser can drop from the last boss in the new Mega Dungeon coming in patch 10.1.5, and when used it will actually take the form of a mount from the past and let you learn it. Now Mr. GM actually had one of these drop in a group he was in, and when the player used the mount it turned into Midnight's Eternal Reigns from Karazhan, which answers one of the most important questions that a lot of people probably have immediately. If this item can turn into any mount in the game, especially from earlier expansions or from the past, would that also include low % drop mounts from the raids? We're talking about Ashes of Allah, Invincible, Midnight, the mounts that some players have spent over 10 years farming and still haven't seen. If the mount can turn into Midnight, it should also be able to turn into almost any other mount that comes from similar sources. That makes this mount item incredibly lucrative, so hopefully it has a somewhat decent drop rate so you can actually get this one if you're still struggling to get some mounts from the past. There are still a lot of questions about this though. Does it include unobtainable mounts? What about TCG mounts like the Spectral Tiger? What is the expansion cutoff for this to be considered from the past? Sadly, I don't think we'll be getting any answers to many of these questions until the patch goes live and we see more data around the drops and conversions of this mount item and quite simply what people are getting from it, but it is all very interesting to me. Now, if you watched one of our most recent videos, you should know that this quantum item isn't the first of its kind or the only kind of item that you can get like this. I think mounts are significantly more valuable when compared to transmog, but there do seem to be quantum items for every single type of gear in the game, for armor and for weapons, and they also seem to drop from that last boss in the mega dungeon. In our group, when we cleared it, every player got one quantum item to unlock a free piece of transmog when we killed the last boss, so they definitely seem to have a decent drop rate. Now you just need to hope for the right quantum item to drop for you. I can't help but wonder why these items are being added into the game right now, and why mounts are being included when mounts are typically the more prestigious, or at least rarer rewards when you look at things historically. There's a lot of chatter about another revamp for Azeroth, and for the game in general. Maybe the next expansion will give us a large reset, but one problem or complaint with these potential revamps has always been, what about the older content? The rewards, the transmog, the mounts? If the game resets again, will all of that just become unavailable? And the typical answer is yes. A lot of content is no longer accessible from before the Cataclysm, but if you can just add in an item that can turn into any mount or item from the past, suddenly you have an avenue to obtain all of those lost rewards. So maybe these quantum items are one piece of the puzzle that points towards Blizzard making some big changes in the next couple of expansions. Either way, I am super excited to see where Dragonflight leads and what lies in store for the World of Warcraft. This week's build also gave us our first look at how the new Warlock pet customization is going to look in-game. There are way more options than I thought there would be. For the imps, lots of colour options and 3 different models to choose from by the looks of things, and the updated ones look really good. The imp isn't just the tiny 2D sprite that it used to be. For the Fell Hunters, a few extra colours and 2 different model styles which also look amazing. I love that you have the red and black fiery destruction look, or the purple and green pure fell look. Super cool. Voidwalkers also have quite a few options to choose from. Less colour variation though, you're kinda stuck to the purples and pinks, but that's fine in my opinion. You're gonna have a lot of fun going through them to see which one you would rather have as your super tank out in the world. The Fell Guard only has the option between the Fell Guard and the Wrath Guard right now, so this is in the barbershop now instead of a glyph. They both still look cool, but I would actually expect to see some updated options and models maybe for these guys if they're going all in on the Warlock Demon customization. The Doom Guards are super funny to me though, because you have the current version or the super old model available, which is hilarious. I can still see these guys chasing after me in Hellfire Peninsula from way back in TBC. Good times. And then for the Succubus, you have a few options here. 3 different colours for the Succubus model, with the third one looking amazing. It's a shame there are clipping issues with certain movements, because this model looks great. Then you have the male option too, so again the previous glyph choices can now be played around with in the barbershop instead. And then you also get the Shivara option in here too. We don't have too many specifics about how these grimoires will be unlocked in the game just yet from what I've seen. Some of them do have sources listed, but they're quite vague for some of them. Apparently there are going to be some special Warlock quests to look forward to as well. Probably something about wrangling demons, no doubt, so keep an eye out for those in a future PTR build. According to the dev notes, we should also see Syad and Infernal customizations in future PTR builds too, so we should have even more options to look forward to. Moving on, another nice quality of life change coming in patch 10.15 is a new raid skip for a very long, older raid with some very special transmog drops. The Siege of Orgrimmar used to take a very long time to clear through simply due to its size, and if you wanted something from the last boss, like the Tusks of Manaroth for example, you would have to clear through the entire raid or set up a cheeky lockout transfer, which was always a bit of a hassle. But in patch 10.15, the raid will finally have a skip option added to the start of the raid. If you killed Hellscream on at least one of your characters, you should see a new scroll on the wall right next to Cho as soon as you enter the raid. If you click on the scroll of past deeds, you'll have the option to skip straight to Garrosh Hellscream. This should make farming anything from the last boss so much faster and easier, so if you're still chasing the mythic mount or that sweet shoulder transmog, farming Garrosh will take no time at all with this skip in place. There are also some updates for the live servers this week, including a huge experience and reputation gains buff. The Diablo 4 Treasure Goblin event may have ended, so we can't chase after that shiny loot anymore, but in its place, the Welcome to Sanctuary event will provide us with some very nice bonuses. The event runs all the way until July 11th, giving us plenty of time to take advantage of the buffs. If you log in during the event, you should have a buff called Winds of Sanctuary that provides you with 50% extra experience gains, as well as reputation gains. The only faction not included here is the Loam Niffen, which is a bit of a shame. The most relevant and most recent faction in Dragonflight will not get to share in the fun this time around, but at least you can use the rep buff to finish off your other Dragonflight reputations, or earn some extra rewards from their excess reputation boxes. The experience gains also make it a great time to get any of your alts leveled up, maybe an Evoker to try out the new spec coming in 10.1.5, or just try out a new character that you haven't played yet. Most systems in Dragonflight are super alt friendly, so it's actually been a lot of fun for me to play alts this time around. It's definitely been a breath of fresh air when compared to some previous expansions in terms of alt accessibility, and the 50% buff will make it lightning quick. Getting from 60 to 70 is already super fast, especially if you take advantage of events like time walking, so the 50% bonus on top of that is going to make it take no time at all. So go get the most out of these 50% bonuses before July 11th. And then to round out this video, just in case you weren't aware, the Revival Catalyst opened up this week to give everyone easier access to their tier set gear for Season 2. The key changes for the season are pretty big. You don't have to do anything to get your charges this time, they're just going to accrue passively, which also means you can't really get left behind in charges this time either, which is also really nice. Your alts do get their own charges, and they should be retroactive, which means if you hit max level on an alt in a few weeks' time, you should have multiple charges to work with instantly, which is also a really great change. As for what gear you can use, it does seem to be quite restrictive. As you would expect, Mythic Plus, Raid and Rated PvP gear all work, so that hasn't changed. But for solo world content players, the only loot that seems to work is world boss loot from Zaralek Cavern and the Farak Assault loot. Both the mini boss loot reward as well as the secured shipment loot do work, so Farak Assaults give you a lot of access to the catalyst. It just seems weird that only Farak Assault loot works when almost no other source from the outdoor world content does, but at least you have a few options to work with. But that's all of the updates for patch 10.1.5 this week, as well as some live server changes, so that's it for this video. What do you think of the Onyx Annulet getting nerfed by 40% going into patch 10.1.5? How about some of those class changes? Do you think there are any classes that still really need some buffs or nerfs? Leave all your thoughts in the comment section below. A big thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon and to all of our members here on YouTube. You can see the names floating by on screen. If you'd like to add your name to the end of every video with a special shout out at the start of the next video, you can find links in the description over to Patreon or click the join button just below this video. And if you want to see more videos like this, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss another video. Thanks for watching folks, good luck and have fun, and as always I will see you next time.